Hello students, welcome to Science Extension and Module 1, the Foundations of Scientific Thinking. In this first of a series of 3 videos, I'm going to give you a little bit of discussion around some of the influences that there are on current scientific thinking and research. And what we might do is to split a couple of these up into subparts like I have with other videos, just so they're a little bit easier to digest. In this video, or at least in this little section of videos, we're going to analyse some of the current influences on scientific thinking, including but not limited to economic, political and global influences. And while I give you a little general introduction, I'll actually split those 3 areas up into some small videos, as I've done before. Our second area that we want to have a look at is political influences. Nick Howe, in publicising his podcast, Politics of the Life Scientific, wrote, "Politics is deeply ingrained in scientists' working life. Be it through funding agendas, cultural lobbies, or personal bias, politics can shape the game in myriad ways, influencing the direction and quality of research. But what does this mean for the objective ideals of science?" What indeed? Governments are significant contributors to scientific budgets and drive public organisations. What applies to economics is also applicable to politics, especially as the finance for many scientific organisations, such as the CSIRO, comes from government. Sabah explored the politics of science both from the perspective of government support engaging in scientific research as a social activity and an inherently political one, and comments on who is allowed to do the science. Sabah wrote, "Society has also historically wielded the power to select who is permitted to become a scientist. We see now the sexist and racist obstructions that have allowed science to be dominated by white males. To many African Americans growing up in a prejudiced society, the path to becoming a scientist is among the paths of most resistance. In the case of women scientists, they could only work as volunteer faculty, leaving accolades for their male counterparts to collect. Nowadays, we would say, you can't be what you can't see." Extraordinary scientists like Esther Lederberg, who discovered the lambda bacteriophage, or Lise Meitner, who literally split the atom, were written out of their textbooks as they watched their male collaborators accept Nobel Prizes without them. Such is also the story of Rosalind Franklin, a personal hero of mine, who changed the entire field of biology and was instrumental in discovering the double helical nature of DNA that we know today. And Sabah wrote that in 2017. We will also have a bit more of a look at Rosalind Franklin later when we talk about ethics. In their paper discussing the influence of political ideology on trust in science in the United States and on climate science in particular, McCride et al. 2013 argued that the anti-reflexivity thesis examines how certain sectors of society mobilise to defend the industrial capitalist order from the claims of environmentalists and some environmental scientists that the current economic system causes serious ecological and public health problems. In the process, this theory distinguishes between scientific endeavours in the service of economic production, termed production science, and those in the service of understanding the human impacts on the environment and human health, termed impact science. The latter type of science regularly provides evidence used to justify governmental regulation of environmentally consequential activities. Thus, the anti-reflexivity thesis suggests that ideological conservatives would increasingly oppose impact science, but likely not oppose production science. The same issue arises in Australia, and it is again the conservative side of politics that seems most publicly critical of the science of climate change. It would be a mistake to think that science is objective and free of cultural and social pressures. As long as science is undertaken by humans, they will bring their own political and social biases and must often work hard not to reflect them in their work. This is even more so when working for a major government organisation such as the Australian Academy of Science or the CSIRO. The nature of elections and electorates means that both policies and the policy makers change regularly, and this can potentially destabilise the process of scientific discovery. It can also hinder appropriate political responses to global issues. Heenan et al. In 2023, writing about Australia's political engagement on health and climate change, observed this: Australia's political engagement on health and climate change is particularly poor. An international comparison of country engagement on climate and health found that Australia's engagement with the health impacts of climate change relates primarily to disaster response and impacts in Pacific Island nations, not in its own communities. Additionally, Australia makes no reference to health in its contribution pledge to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and to date is one of few countries lacking a national health and climate change strategy. While science seeks to remain free of political influence, history suggests that politics has had, and continues to have, a significant influence on scientific thinking.